All right, cool. We'll give people another minute or so to join. But as I have been told before in my life, if you're late, you're late. So we won't wait too long. Okay, great. I think we'll go ahead and get started with some introductory remarks. So to introduce myself, my name is Rowan Walrath, and I am the editor of BostInno. We are a news and events platform dedicated to covering startups and innovation across Massachusetts. We're part of American Inno, which is a network of 14 markets and growing that work to catalyze innovation nationwide. So at BostInno, we do that in a couple of ways. The first and foremost is The Beat, which is a newsletter that I curate and write. It goes out every single weekday afternoon. And you should really consider it your one-stop shop for everything happening in the greater Boston startup scene. You can sign up for The Beat if you're not already on our list by going to BostInno.com, where you can also read our original coverage of newly launched startups, fundraising, and issues in the ecosystem. We also try to catalyze and connect local innovators through events like this one. So this, as you all know, is BostInno's virtual State of Innovation on startup diversity and inclusion. We are hosted by a virtual host, RuPauls Group. RuPauls Group is the premier off-price e-commerce portfolio company, connecting more than 35 million members with coveted designers and in-demand labels at an exceptional value. I'd be remiss if I did not also mention our other event sponsors who made today possible. The Grommet, which is on a mission to fundamentally change the way people launch, discover, share, and purchase products. The Tech Connection, a diversity recruitment platform that helps innovative companies make meaningful connections to diverse talent for their open job opportunities. And First Republic. First Republic and its subsidiaries offer private banking, private business banking, and private wealth management, including investment, trust, and brokerage services. Now, I'm super excited to dive into our panel discussion, but I'll start by letting each of our lovely panelists introduce herself. Paris, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Paris. I'm creator of the hashtag movement and community Black Tech Twitter and founder of Black Tech Pipeline. What I do is I bring opportunity, resources, and exposure to Black technologists.
Awesome. Sankeetha?
Hi, I'm Sankeetha Selvarajah. I'm a corporate attorney and a business strategist for small businesses and startups here in Boston, Massachusetts, as well as New York.
All right. How about you, Nicole?
I'm Nicole Sylvester, Learning and Development Manager at RuPauls Group. I'm also championing our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts throughout the company.
That was wonderful. And last but not least, Mojo Sarika.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maja Sarika Alize. People may know me as Rika. I am the CEO of BeautyLink, a marketplace platform that connects beauty professionals and customers for on-location appointments, and also the co-founder for At the Table, an experience really focused in on bringing female founders together to build community.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to have you all here today. So let's just go ahead and dive in. So first things first is, it's always great when diversity in tech and the startup world is back in the limelight, but it does feel kind of like it's an ebb and flow with the news cycle. Racism rears its head in really visceral ways, and then employers scramble reactively. And that kind of reactive behavior can also lead to a really narrow definition of diversity itself, rather than one that includes people of color as well as immigrants, women, folks from the LGBTQ community, and people who live at the intersections of those identities. What can organizations do to create change that's more sustainable and long-lasting?
Well, I know from my experience in the local ecosystem, the things that I think that have worked really well has been an increase in empathy, training, right? And definitely looking to break certain barriers. I think that there's a lot of challenges when it comes to the different parts of Boston and how people will not branch out to other parts of Boston in order to build a more diverse and inclusive community. But all that is going to happen with time and change, right? And I guess lastly, the one thing I can really advocate for is policy change. So, as we move and change as a state, being able to push forward that we need more women on boards, we need more people of color on boards, we need more participation, right? I think that those are the things that we could look forward to as organizations start to change the lens of what they want to see.
Yeah, and I feel like, this needs to be a belief and a practice at the foundation of the company, and it doesn't end with one workshop. This is something that needs to be consistent until this company dies out and never returns. This is just how life needs to be, and that's how you want to hire with that in mind. You want to keep the culture with that in mind. It's not a one-time thing, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, totally agreed with that, Paris. I think it's about striking a balance between being reactive where appropriate and being proactive and planning not just what are we going to do today, but what are we going to do a year from now? What are we going to do 3 years from now? Rika, I love what you said about empathy. I think especially with the events of this past summer, one of the most important things for us to support our associates was to be able to say, it's okay if you feel like you can't do business as usual. We need to take a beat and we need to talk about what's going on. And that way, that reaction is necessary in order to make your associates feel supported and to practice empathy. But then we sat down and said, okay, like this is great. Diversity and inclusion has been on our roadmap for a while, but we really have to put some stakes in the ground to, beyond this conversation, say, how are we going to continue to support these conversations when they need to be had, other conversations that haven't made it to the table yet, and how do we make real actionable change throughout, the next 3 years, the next 5 years?
I actually echo all of that, and it's great. We started off with that, Rika, on a very basic level, even maintaining or changing your standard operating procedures. Every organization, how many times have you seen that brick of that handbook, and nobody really edits that or makes that into a living document where you can say, hey, this is what's happening, and it keeps up with societal and cultural changes. So you amend it as needed, but it's something that's already on the forefront of everyone's mind, and it's also codified as well. I know I hate to be the lawyer here, but like just to codify it, to allow that opportunity to say, hey, we can edit this, hey, we can actually include it as part of our operating procedures, as part of our mission, and really put that in writing, so to speak. So it's real. It's just not fluff talked about. It's actually actionable items that are, stated as well, that anybody can access.
Right. Yeah, I feel like right now, like when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in companies, it seems just very fluffy, and it's more so like, how can we have more team bonding sessions and things that that's not really going to contribute to change. You need to actually dig into your current systems and processes and all those policies and break them down and find where there is bias, racism, sexism, because it's in there. And you have to just do the work of improving that and continuing to improve it over time, because things always change. You have to change with the times.
It's like dating. Yeah. You really have to be intentional about the goals you want, right?
Right.
Do you want to be married? Date with intention to marry. Think about what it means to be intentional when you make these moves. That's just the way that I look at it. But being a founder of color myself, I think I've always looked at the idea of being inclusive versus it being the opposite. Right? So I've always looked at what can I do to make it look, a little bit different. They can't assume that the whole entire staff is going to be Black because I'm a Black founder, right? And, so I think that it has a lot to do with leadership and also background, right? And also the way that you were raised. I think about that a lot. I mean, I thank my mom every day for the simple fact that she did everything in her power to put me in private school, right? I was part of a very diverse community, but, at the same time, you think about the challenges associated with not having that privilege, right? And what your networks look like and how you move forward. But, when I think about Boston, I think we just need to be more intentional about the changes we want to see. We have to be intentional. We have to be empathetic. We have to really understand that if we want to be the city on the hill, we need to be willing to also make those changes at that level.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Intentional and empathetic and considerate.
Yeah, for sure. So when y'all are thinking about, building these policies within your own companies, or with companies that you work with as perhaps a consultant or a lawyer, what kinds of questions do you want leaders to be asking themselves, and how can those questions become action items?
Oh, I definitely ask. A lot of nonprofits have to have this, is to have a mission already, but I really want to challenge for-profit organizations to think what exactly is your mission as well, beyond providing a product or services. Like, how is your organization actually advancing or adding to societal or cultural goals here? What else are you doing? Basically, you can't just provide a product and service here, of course, to make your revenue goals, of course, but how are you as a pillar of society? How is your organization going to stand as a pillar of society or an example, and so forth? So the challenge starts happening there, where we're starting those conversations and saying, what's your mission? What else are you doing? How else are you providing? And so that it definitely starts a great conversation as well too, and makes leadership think about what else they can do, and that starts that snowball effect, ideally.
Yeah, and I also think thinking. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Paris.
Okay, I'll just go. I think also thinking about what you're not providing and who you are forgetting. So if you have this product, who are you really marketing towards? Who can actually afford it? Who's this really going to benefit? And then when you think of that group, now you know you have all of these other communities that aren't able to access this. Why is that? And I think it's just good to think about those questions as well, even thinking backwards.
Yeah. And I think along those lines, one of the things that we talk about regularly is not just what do we do and what are we going to do, but how do we go about it? And that kind of highlights for us, not just our business goals and our action items, but also what's that fabric of what's the intention and what's the value that we're building ourselves on and how we go about achieving something. That applies to everything from our business goals to where we're going as an organization in terms of, building diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just what we're going to do, but how we're going to go about it.
I mean, I think about day one when I started my company. And the first thing I did was list off the experiences that made me feel disempowered where I worked before. And then I decided, based off that, what do I want to make sure that I don't do? And then after that experience, I started to learn more about my consumer. And, I would say today's consumers are more driven about mission than ever. They want to know and understand that you want to make an impact in the world, or they won't spend, right? Like, what are you doing to change the world that I'm part of? And if you can show me that you care, I'll give you my money. But otherwise, there's so many different ways to get what I want. Like, why are you the one to get my dollars? And, the resources that are available today to so many different companies to look at as like, hey, here's how to make meaningful change, right? And organizations that are putting materials out. You have ICCC, Link. You have a whole bunch of different companies that are looking at what can we do in order to think a little bit differently outside the box. I know for my company, we really use music in a different way, right? Because I need translation. I need to understand what's going on. If it's something great, send me a happy song. If it's something horrible, send me something that will scare me. Either or, right? Like, share with me what I need to know. But I think that a lot of the resources that are around are just not vastly available in one centric place. And I think our state and our city are trying to change that a little bit, because I think that there's so many different resources and people just don't know where to find them, right? Even when you look at these accelerator programs, a lot of them do have cultural practices put in place for you to be able to take a look and dive in when it comes to D&I, when it comes to HR, right? But where do you start if you are not raising venture? Where do you start if you're just beginning, right? Versus becoming a vast company. And I think that's where training comes in. I think that's where people need to share the resources on city websites if possible, like the city of Boston, or looking at, external reviews from consultants into your company to see if you're doing right by your customer and by your staff.
Absolutely. Before we move on with the panel, I do want to remind our audience here, we are taking questions throughout that you can drop in the GoToWebinar little box that should be on the right side of your computer, and we will get to those at the end. But I want to come back to this idea of empowerment, because sometimes it seems to me like folks think that a lack of diversity is more forgivable on the startup level, because companies are so small, they don't have HR departments, et cetera. So how can people push back on that idea, especially within those organizations?
I think your team begins on day one, though, right? So who you're with, who you're connecting with, your service providers, your partners, your VCs, your potential VCs, your client, okay? Like Paris mentioned earlier, is like, who are you not providing this service to, or who are you? What's your demographic? So I definitely think that your circle of opportunity for diversity is larger than you think, right? So just start from day one, start from person one, population one, you, and go from there and start connecting and see who are you intentionally and unintentionally not connecting with, or can you do so going forward. It's just a awareness, a different sort of awareness at that point, where you look for opportunity to connect and grow with people that you normally wouldn't have considered before. So I certainly don't agree with that statement that, you're not supposed to handle this just because you have one or two people. Hello, it's a great big world out there. So,
right, yeah, you're supposed to, if you have something that's like a great opportunity to build in diversity, equity, inclusion at the foundation of the company and grow with it, instead of doing what all of these companies have done, which is they've grown, then they have like 500 or plus employees, and they're looking around and everyone looks the same, everyone thinks the same, and then you want to bring in this diverse candidate into this, you're bringing them into this culture that's already been established. This is something I say all the time, like, if you have the chance to build this in at the foundation, then do it. It has to be a priority. You have to be intentional about it. And again, just like Sankeetha said, it's about like awareness.
It also actually prevents groupthink. You get the same people in the same crew all the time, and you get bored. They're like the same people talking again and again with the same ideas. It's just getting recycled.
Right. It becomes like an echo chamber.
It is. And you're just like, well, there's no progress because there's no real diversity of thought here that's like pushing it or challenging or moving the needle in any different way. Right. So think of it as a great way to add a different voice to your organization that actually increases your future profit. So when you look at it as like a profit investment, this changes everything, right? So
I agree. I think that because I sat on the island by myself for like, I'd say 6 to 8 months, right? 6 to 8 months of building my company intentionally. I was alone because I wanted to understand product market fit. I also wanted to understand what my capacity was to recruit. And what I learned was without the funding, I couldn't recruit diverse, right? As much as I wanted to, I couldn't, because I couldn't tell someone to put their livelihood in my hands without having a company that was going to be able to support their livelihood, right? And I think that when we think about diversity and inclusion, we also have to think about the stages in which these companies are going, and if they're intentionally choosing to go venture, then yes, it needs to happen from day one, right? But if what we're considering is an SMB, right, a small or medium-sized business, right, they're not thinking about it the same way that we are, right? They are thinking about it in the standpoint of trying to find product market fit and to build the team. And, it took me a little bit of time to be able to understand, right, what that means. because when I first started, I really wanted the best of the best. And I had to learn that I couldn't hire the best of the best without money. I could have them fall in love with my product and have them say that they would love to watch me from a distance. However, I couldn't support that. And I feel like that's a topic that we don't really talk about when it comes to diversity and inclusion, is being at that space where you can't afford it. You can have a diverse network, and there will be people who will introduce you to other people, build your network. But when it comes to hiring, this is strictly when it comes to hiring, if you do not have the funding, it makes it a bit of a challenge to make sure that your team is as diverse as possible from day one.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you, Rika, for that. But if you're going to start, you can even start as small as getting an advisor to come on on your advisory board. And some of those positions are unpaid, or you just take them out to dinner once a quarter, or you give them equity shares after, set amount of time. So, there's different ways to skin that cat. I know you're talking about hiring, but also having these type of voices in your head, so to speak, to give you that guidance and give you that perspective. It's easier than you think. You just have to find creative ways of including them if you're motivated and intentional about it. Going back to intent is everything.
I totally agree, but I will say, and I won't share this experience because I've learned a lesson a very hard way, right? There are people who are out and malicious when they understand that you are a founder of color with limited access to resources. And this does include advisors. This does include mentors. You need to be protective of your energy and protective of your company. And as much as you want, as much help as you can get, there are people who do have malicious intentions when they know that you do not have the resources as a founder who is not the norm. Otherwise.
Yeah. There's also ways to protect against that too, where, obviously, forgive me for being biased, but getting your accountant and your attorney on board early so that you can actually have those conversations and be protected on that end to say, weigh the odds on that. It's true. I agree
think that's a really good set of advice. And I think that what ends up happening is that depending on where you are when you start your company and ecosystems, it can be somewhat an easy or a very difficult task. But I think that what you said makes total sense. Yeah. And one day I will share that story and I will sing it from the rooftop because I do not want to see another founder go through that challenge.
Yeah. I mean, running a company is not for the faint of heart. Sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm just thinking, Rika, to your point about the different stages of your growth and, and maybe it looks a little bit different than you had anticipated as you're getting things started up, but every startup should have at its core, I think, empowered associates who, maybe we're not necessarily, I think, Rowan, what you said was, pushing back against the lack of diversity, but a group of associates who are empowered to create diversity, maybe at a different stage. If we're running into malicious intent and, you're building the team that you can build for right now, it's also empowering them to be the team that, again, it's who are we today and who do we want to be somewhere down the line, empowering them to that vision.
Awesome. I piggyback right off of what Nicole just said. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Great. I think we're getting some actionable advice items in here too, which is awesome for some of the founders in the audience. Switching gears a little bit, I do want to talk about Boston's role in the lack of diversity in the ecosystem specifically, because this city is one of the most heavily segregated cities in the nation. And it's becoming a better and better known fact that, at least as of 2017, the median net worth of Black Bostonians was $8, just one digit, 8. So how can businesses and organizations play a role in making Boston as a whole a better and more inclusive community, and one that goes beyond making a statement.
I feel like this has to do with, in my opinion, this has to do with you being just a good human. And like, if you know that this is the case, again, it's like, have awareness, be intentional. So this is referring people to Black businesses, Black founders, like building relationships, making connections, engaging with one another, introducing people. I mean, there's so much that you can do. And I feel like when I say it, it's almost like telling someone, oh, it's easy, just Google it, right? And like, I know you can't just say that, but there are so many really simple ways that you can go about this. And I literally feel like it just starts with you being that type of individual who wants to see that change. I don't know if anyone else feels this way.
From the organization side, from leadership side, I just would ask any Boston owner or founder to take a look at their vendor, their partner list, their client list, their service providers, you know, their partner organizations, and actually doing one step further and holding them accountable, like asking who they partner with and who they align with, like what's your D&I policies? What are you all doing over there? And also two things that are really important is taking a look at your budget. How much of your budget have you set aside for D&I efforts? And also your time, like maybe even partnering or mentoring a fellow POC owner or founder, or setting aside, you know, some sort of scholarship or connection or, you know, reciprocal work study type of issues, so that, you know, more POC founders, people of color founders, could actually be exposed to different types of methodologies in that sense. So, I mean, it's systematic if you just go down the list. Now, in practice, it might be a little bit different, but
Yeah.
you know, the intent is there.
Oh, I love that. I think it's about, you know, it is first and foremost about supporting your associates, right, in-house, making sure, you know, just little things like having an office in a location that is accessible via public transit. It seems like such a basic thing, but it's so vital to being able to have diverse associates. And we also have to look at our communities outside of our organization. Sankeetha, to your point, like, let's look at our vendors, but let's also look at our community and recognize, being in Boston, you know, we have a lot of underfunded areas, and how do we get involved and, you know, take really seriously your job as a steward to get involved, whether that's partnering with, you know, a foundation to support youth, you know, maybe not necessarily people who are in your industry, but, you know, people who are growing into potentially being in your industry one day, or maybe creating some volunteer efforts. But like taking that full 360 view, I love that. It's our associates, it's our communities, it's our vendors.
I mean, this also prevents some of the fluff that we were talking about, right? So, you know, all the micro movements and all the micro events or acts that your company does, where can it be shifted into something that could move the needle in this area too?
I'm just going to say that I remember when that story came out. When that story came out, I was currently in the space of just, you know, learning the ecosystem in San Francisco, New York, and Boston. And I'm so sorry you're from Boston. That was just, you know, it was just a phrase. It was just like, I'm so sorry. Like, you should move to New York. You should move to San Francisco. And all I could think about was like, if I can make it in Boston, I can make it anywhere. It's okay. You don't have to worry about me. I have the strength to make it. But, you know, when I think about that, I think that, you know, we are in a place where we need to be more empathetic. We need to be more empathetic, and we need to be more understanding about the environment that we have built and the environment that we are trying to change. And with that being said, I think that organizations are doing a great job. There have been organizations doing work behind this for over 10 years,
Absolutely.
right? And they are not getting any credit thus far right now about the work that they have been able to do to break down the barrier. However, when I think about where we're moving forward, when it comes to companies and organizations, what can we do in order to change and transform the systemic challenges we have? One, we have to acknowledge there's a problem. Two, we have to be empathetic. Three, we have to start seeing each other as equals. I don't think that, personally, in my experience, there have been situations in which I got frustrated because as a founder of color, I received introductions versus receiving checks. And when I think about that, I think about the resources that were pushing me to do 10 times more. Because when the story came out that the wealth of a Black Bostonian was $8, it led to a lot of fear. It led to a lot of challenges associated with trying to want to be that founder who wanted to push the boundaries. I want to push the boundaries. I want to change the world. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we're like, you were born and raised in Boston, right? Yeah. Oh. And then you move back and then you're just like, yo, be like, ask me my story, ask me about what I've been through, but don't just automatically assume that this story is the only thing you need to see. It's time to listen, it's time to be aware, and it's time to be able to be part of the change, period. And I'm going to advocate for transparency as well when I think about what we need to do in order to change the Boston ecosystem. I think we need to be more transparent about what we're doing well and what we're doing horribly wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that. And I think, Sankeetha, your suggestion of, just really looking at the people that you work with to see what they're doing as well, it's so helpful to have that full transparency.
Yeah, be open to feedback, be open to criticism, and don't hide from it. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't just accept it and improve with that. Make those changes. Do not be performative about it. Don't say this is what we're going to do. We don't want to see the board. What are those boards called? It's like an inspiration board.
Oh, like the vision board. Yeah.
Vision board. There we go. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the vision board.
Make an action board. Make an action board.
I love that.
Right.
Vision board.
No vision board. I want actions.
Okay, but I will say that there's a huge difference between advice and opinions in that journey, and that it takes a lot to discern that as you go down your journey as a founder or as a service provider, right? There's a lot that you will hear and a lot you will see, and not all of that is really intentional about helping you improve.
But I do want to say that in this time when people are looking for an option or looking for ways to do this, that to believe that there are no stupid questions here. I think we're all walking each other home in this way, in the sense that we're all trying to figure this out. It's an evolving conversation, and this is the one thing that I hear from other founders or other Caucasian or people that are not people of color are saying, like, what if I ask the wrong question? What if I'm not, what if I look stupid or I should have known or whatnot, which completely, stymies any sort of conversation, real conversation that could come up. And we're here now. Let's start here and just go from there. And that's kind of like the way that I've started to look at it, in the sense that if you have some of the knowledge, share it, and then go from there. And like I said, we're all in this together.
I agree, but I don't feel like it's my place as a person of color to educate every single person who
Agreed.
needs to understand. I think I went through a really interesting few months where I just had to put my foot down. You can ask the question, and I'm totally willing and able to want to answer, but you cannot expect me to answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. That's definitely.
I want that opportunity to be able to say, I don't want to be the person to educate you.
Mm-hmm.
And Google's been around for a while.
I was going to say, there's so many ways to educate yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, you can do your own research, you can read, you can pay consultants, you can pay for people's time. Don't accept things for free. Yeah, there are tons of different approaches. The knowledge and education, all that is out there.
Absolutely. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I'm going to pivot to a different question here, which is about venture capital. So VC has a crucial role to play, obviously, in the startup world. And Boston is one of the top 5 cities for venture capital, but VC's portfolios here, as they are in most of the US, are overwhelmingly white and male. So if you're looking out at the next 12 months, what are action steps that VCs need to take? Maybe hiring a consultant. Maybe that's the answer.
Or maybe you could start with a consultant. If not, they don't already have one on staff, but also going into areas that they normally wouldn't, what they would consider off the beaten path, or maybe expanding that in the next 12 months, like here in Boston anyway, going to places like Roxbury Innovation Center, Nubian Market, formerly known as Dudley Square, or Fairmont Innovation Lab. It's not lack of innovation, it's just lack of investment here. And so just even also the reciprocal conversation, because founders also don't know where to connect with VCs of this nature. So, maybe having a separate, stop or office hours, where I think Nicole mentioned it, where putting it in a location where it's accessible to, transportation, or is in some place like Nubian Market, and where you can say, hey, we're a VC, we are looking to fund. Let's set up some office hours and talk about this, and set it up online so anybody can actually sign up for it and then show up. So I think it's just actually expanding that footprint.
Yeah.
I think that there's a higher level of fear and not understanding when you go into different communities.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes everything from not knowing where to build the network, to not understanding the language, to not having the resources to build adequately, right? And when I think about VCs and I think about the work that they've done, I think that there's a lot of things that have been done well, right? I think, like, let's take a look at, initiatives such as, All Raise, right? Let's take initiatives like NEVCA with their Hack Diversity, right? And let's take a look at some of the other, groundbreaking programs. I'm just saying that when I think about the VC issue, right? I think it's a systemic issue that needs to be challenged with more than just D&I, but as a structural issue, right? Not everyone wants to raise $1 million, right? What does it
Not
look
everyone
like
thinks
to
that.
fund?
That's
No,
another thing
no, I'm
that's
not
so
saying that's true, but I'm also saying that the reason why some of these VCs don't go into particular locations is because what the check size that they want to write is not the check size that people are chasing, right? And I think that there's a lot of great things that could happen. And I think that service providers, right, and consultants are the route in order to make the bridge come together, right?
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
it will dispel the fear, right, and increase the empathy in order for two sides to really understand each other and come together, right?
Yeah.
Because this is how these programs have started. This is exactly how they started. There were startups looking to hire more diverse tech talent, and VCs knew it was a problem. NEVCA steps in, Hack Diversity happens. All Raise is set up for female founders, right, that want to raise Series A, Series B, and moving forward. I just think that we just need to be more open to the idea that maybe innovation is needed in the VC community to be able to change some of these systemic issues that we're having right now. And I see the pathway of change really happening between service provider and consultants, bridging the gap for the challenges that we're dealing with right now.
Great. We have a bunch of audience questions, so I'm going to get to those in just a sec. But I do have one more question for all of you. What are some wins you've seen or even accomplished yourself recently that give you hope?
I think one of the things that I've seen that gives me the most hope, and that I feel like is such a win for us at RuPaul Group, is we've had so many of these very honest conversations. Sankeetha, to what you said about just asking questions, being able to get a group of people together to ask hard questions and have hard conversations and have honest discussions where finally, it doesn't matter what your role is, what level you are, what your background is, we're getting together and we're listening to one another in a way that I think is very new. It is very needed. And the thing that I'm most excited about is that this is driven by our associates. So like we are a little bit of a teenager. We're not like a true startup. We've got about 600 full-time associates. We've been around for 11 years, but we're now working, diversity, equity, inclusion into everyday conversations. And, our associates are the ones championing that. So they're the ones who are really saying, you know what, let me raise my hand and share my voice and my story in a way that's really honest and that's allowing people to be educated and allowing people to have diverse thoughts and ideas and opinions in a way that is just very exciting.
Yeah, for me, with Black Tech Pipeline, I have a lot of new clients who, because I have a recruitment piece where I recruit Black technologists, but I also have a job board. And both of these services are dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when someone gets hired out of Black Tech Pipeline, I virtually stay on the job with them for the first 90 days. And I get feedback from that candidate who got hired on their experience at the company to make sure that they didn't get sent somewhere harmful. And I relay that feedback to their manager or someone in leadership, and that allows me to tell them where they need to do improvements and just what the experience of someone diverse is having at their predominantly white company. But we get to work together on their policy and breaking those down and improving them. And it's just been like I've noticed with smaller companies, it's such a positive experience. And I love when I hear like, we want real feedback. We want to be transparent. Like if you have to hurt our feelings, do it. And that's who I can work with. And that gives me hope because I'm getting more and more of that. So it's nice to see people are so open to, criticism because they actually want to change.
Love that.
I think I had the same as well too. About 62% of my clients are white males. The founders, our CEOs are white males. I represent tech and startup companies. And what was really great to see is they came to me rather than me go to them about any sort of D&I efforts. They're like, what do I do? Tell me what to do. Let me fix this. I was just like, it's a longer conversation than that, okay? But let's just say that they made the first attempt, and I consider that a win more than anything, in the fact that they're willing to initiate the conversation to start the change. And that was refreshing and great for me to see.
I'm just excited for a couple of things, to be honest. More women of color are being funded. That's a win.
Yeah.
They stopped counting women of color and where they were in terms of who was raising millions. That's a win, right? I think that those are huge wins and systemic challenges that we weren't discussing beforehand. It's exciting to see organizations such as All Raise continue to build and continue to change opportunities for founders. And I think that, we are currently in a space where VCs are starting to open up deal flow with more diverse VCs. So we will see a change. It all has to build a bridge. And I'm very excited to see what empathy is going to lead to for the future. Because I think we were coming from a place where we weren't as empathetic about the challenges that people were facing to build a different, culture, a different universe, a different Boston.
100%. All right, thank you all so much. Thanks to the audience members who have sent in questions. I think we're gonna have time to get to everybody, but if not, I'm gonna go ahead and drop my email in the chat box here. So if anyone wants to follow up or just wants to connect with BostInno more generally about diversity or in the startup ecosystem or anything else, then please feel free to reach out. All right, the first question is specifically for Nicole. Can you comment on the discussions that the Rue Gilt Group has had about including more models of color and more fashion brands founded by people of color, and even discussions about featuring expanded sizes?
Yeah, we've had a ton of these conversations throughout the last few months, and I think it's it's important to talk about it, but it's even more important, I think, we're talking about fluff, to take action on it. Like, let's not just have the conversation, but let's get the rubber to the road and really get moving on this. We have started to make a big effort. I mean, there's a huge challenge right now, being that we are in COVID times, and the majority of people are working remotely, but, we're really putting effort towards making sure that we have a more diverse set of models. Representation is so important. And, we were talking earlier about who are we serving? Like, who is our customer and who are we leaving out? And it's really being thoughtful about the people who are looking at our site and maybe not seeing themselves represented, and then saying like, well, maybe this isn't the place for me. And so we have to be mindful of that. And we're trying to, very quickly in a challenging time, turn things around and have more inclusion across sizes, representing, the real woman, and not necessarily, everybody being size 0. But we also want to be inclusive in terms of diverse backgrounds. And not every model should be, a size 0, 6 foot tall and white. We want to have a little bit more diversity. And I will say we have a fantastic team working on this right now, who's very capable of meeting the challenge. And I'm excited to see, how our site is looking a month from now.
Great, thank you. Another audience member asked, what I hear a lot from the businesses that I represent is that diverse candidates aren't applying for the positions they have available. What advice do you have for those looking to attract a broader candidate pool?
So
be inclusive in your marketing and your campaigning for your applications. If they do not see people of color on your hire site, your hire landing page, they're not going to consider it. Also, not having diverse leaders in management is also a huge indicator on if someone's going to apply or not. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I would say, don't just stop there. If you're not seeing diverse candidates applying, you have to seek them out. I agree with everything that Rika said about making sure that there's representation, but also make sure that you're kind of doing your due diligence and not just saying, well, we didn't get anybody, so there must not be anyone. Like, there's gotta be. If we look at the diversity in our population in the city of Boston, there are plenty of people who don't necessarily look like your average associate or have the same background as your average associate. And so there's got to be somebody.
Yeah, you have to like get up and do the work. That's going to require time and energy. And if you truly want this, that's just what you're going to have to invest into it. And there are things, if you want diverse candidates, are you involved or connected to diverse communities? Who's in your network? And you can find that online by joining communities on Twitter. I'm going to plug Black Tech Twitter in here. You have Black technologists. We're connected with a bunch of other communities that are considered underrepresented in this industry. There are diverse job boards that market to diverse candidates, diverse technologists. I'm just going to plug Black Tech Pipeline here because we have a job board for Black technologists as well. So those are things that you can do. But at the end of the day, DE&I, regardless of where you're using it, it requires like time and effort and energy, and that's just what it is. You have to work for it. It's not easy.
And being creative, also looking on venues that you wouldn't suspect to be someplace to job hunt. Instagram, TikTok. I've seen some great stuff. I'm not even gonna lie, on TikTok, I've seen some great stuff. I've seen some great stuff on TikTok. But you have to be diverse and try to break out. I remember when I was in college, the number one thing I wanted to do was, I had a problem with a cultural name. And so I started faxing my application and my resume because I couldn't get beyond the email with the cultural name.
Sneaky.
So, you just have to get creative and you have to be diligent and keep going.
Yeah, and be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're gonna enter communities that are going to have topics of discussion that might concern someone like you, and the lack of effort to you know, converse with them or have built some type of relationship with them in those communities. So
Awesome. Thank you all. Another question. It is common to believe that founders of color have the networks to build advisory boards or to get people to take equity, or that they have lawyers and accountants. As a founder of color, I have had to take whatever I can get my hands on team-wise at times. There's not a question attached to that, but I'm thinking, you know, how does that change?
Can I comment on it?
Yeah, Sankeetha, you better get that.
So, I mean, this is following this. I mean, seek and you shall find, right? So let's start here. Okay. There are areas and communities in Boston that you can go to connect. Okay. So you can't just be at home on your couch. Well, right now in COVID, you have to be, but you know, you can make that email introduction. You can ask for a phone chat like this, but to connect with other founders or other advisors is an opportunity for you to go out and do that yourself. CWE, Center for Women Enterprise, where I also volunteer at, and all of the innovation centers, CIC, RIC, all of them have open office hours by service providers such as attorneys, accountants, mentors, financial consultants, all of that. Take advantage of those. They are free. There's a lot of free resources, and if you're going to be in any startup city, this is the one to get that. This is the one to get your free resources, because this ecosystem is an ecosystem, and people actually put back what they get out as well. And you'll find that there's also VC office hours that you could go in and talk to and say, hey, this is what I'm looking at. If you're a new founder, I would also recommend that you invest in your service team. Your first investment is your accountant, which is your finance person. Okay, so you know where your money's going or how you're going to structure it. So that is one of your best investments. The second one is probably a co-founder, and then your lawyer, one or the other, but to protect your assets in that fashion too. And these two people can also be the base for your advisory board. So you kind of think step by step by step and just build out. But you're not alone. I think we need to keep stressing that. This is not a city. You're not somewhere like Kansas City, where the startup ecoculture isn't that developed as Boston, right? If you're not taking advantage of it, the only person that is responsible for that is you. So again, if you want an advisor, if you want to have a good service team, you're going to have to go look for it. But I don't think you have to look far. That's what I'm saying in this town. So again, as you all as founders,
I piggyback with Sankeetha, you will find what you're looking for if you decide to look. However, as a founder of color, remember that you have a couple other challenges that you have to deal with in general, and that's breaking down silos of network, right? That's huge. And as much as you want them to discover you in Roxbury, they might need to discover you in the Seaport. You need to know your why. If you don't know why you're doing something, it's going to be challenging to be able to get the next connection anyway. And, you know, I just advocate and speak to this when it comes to being a founder of color that grew up in Mattapan and Dorchester, that didn't graduate from a Harvard or MIT or anything like that. When it took time for me to build my network, I had to hustle. I had to leave Roxbury. I had to leave Mattapan. I had to be willing to like take meetings with anybody who was willing to meet with me. I had to get my pitch down to 2 minutes or less. I had to let them know why I was doing what I was doing. And if they did not feel like that was right, then they weren't right for me and I needed to move on.
I think also a skill, I think Rika, we've talked about, is not taking things personal. Right? So you got to, oh, it does. Don't get me wrong, it does. You got to take a beat. You definitely have to take a beat, but this is still business, right? And there's to a point that you have to keep moving forward. And if you think that you're feeling rejection in one area, or you're not getting the response that you envisioned on your first time out, I mean, to use Rika's example of dating, you got to go back out there, you know, and start dating.
You want to be married, you got to do something different than what you did.
You want that funding? You got to go out and go find some funders. Okay, that's it. Keep trying.
There's that, and then there's also the idea of knowing the difference between advice and opinions. I don't know how many like meetings I took where someone told me I wouldn't get anywhere, and I was able to get further. So you need those type of like feedbacks and those processing in order to keep you moving. So that way you have your like your rebound ready, right? If you're going in for the game, you're going in to be LeBron, be ready. Be ready.
And
Like,
and to what she was saying about knowing your why, when you do get that rejection, when you do get that pushback, you can always go back to, this is why I keep doing it. This is why I'm coming back to it. And so having that at the back of your head, and, you know, propelling your actions is a great way to stay grounded as well. So,
Great, thank you all again. I have another question here in the GoToWebinar panel about diverse recruiting. One person wants to know if any of you have had success attending events or networking with specific organizations that you want to highlight.
diverse hiring.
Diverse recruiting. So if you are a recruiter in this scenario.
Oh, I mean, Blavity's networks have been great. Black Tech Connection does a good job. I'm not really sure about, you know, any VCA's Hack Diversity. I haven't had a need for
Hack diversity for sure.
Yeah, I haven't had a need for that space. But I think that there are a lot of platforms moving forward with contractors that are doing some really great work. But you know, I can't really. What's that platform that's connected to Drafted? Drafted was really good. Drafted was a great platform that I enjoyed looking at when I was considering recruiting and looking at diverse networks because of the way it's intertwined. It made a lot of great sense for me. It's not an organization, but it's a great company if you are looking to do recruitment and look at a more diverse community.
Yeah, and I'll echo Rika. Hack Diversity is great for a diverse pipeline, and also Europe is also a great option.
Also resilient coders.
Oh yeah, they are good. Yeah, they are.
Great. And another question for the group. What are some of your favorite nonprofits and volunteer organizations that you've partnered with that you love?
CWE. I really enjoy working with CWE. I've done it for the past few years. Mass Challenge.
Mass Challenge. I've done CWE as well too. Mass Challenge as well. The Innovation Centers, CIC, RIC, they've done great things as well, and they're still relevant throughout COVID during this time too.
Oh, wow. Great.
And I think I've enjoyed a lot of work with there's a program that works with high schoolers.
Build?
Built. Yeah.
Yeah.
Built. Yeah, I love working with them. They're great.
Yeah.
Trep Camp works with small teams of founders that come up with an idea, and there's mentors that take them through that journey as well. That's one out there. That's all voluntary as well.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Great. And one more request for recommendations from the audience. Are there D&I consultants that this group recommends?
Paris.
And yeah, thanks.
This is the opportunity to plug yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything. I was like, I'm just gonna let everyone else. So yeah, I do DE&I consultations. I usually do it after I do recruitment. When you recruit one of my candidates into your company, that's how I'm like providing that feedback from that candidate to you, and we work on improvements. There are others within the Black Tech Twitter community who work within the tech space.
Yeah, Blendor is good.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those questions where when you ask someone, do you have any more questions? And then they can't think of it. So this is something I would put in an email for you to send out to others, for other consultants that you should work with.
He geeks out. They do stuff too, right?
Nada as well too.
He geeks out. Blendor, Paris. Those are my three. I'm done.
There's a woman named Netta Jenkins that she's out of RIP, I think, but she does D&I consulting for a number of companies, for tech companies too. She's out there, so I mean, I'm happy to plug her as well. She's gonna be like, where is this coming from? But yeah.
Oh, also Hustle Crew. I'm gonna put them in the chat.
Yes.
And Tech Connection too.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, love it. And a couple of audience members have also actually given us some recommendations. So Sniper Women in Enterprise with Sankeetha, you mentioned, Bastia Angels, and Year Up, and again, Hack Diversity. So that's great. All right, we are running to time, and I want to be mindful of everyone. So thank you all so much for providing your insights this afternoon and making some time and taking your lunch hour to join us at BostInno. To our audience members, we are running virtual events across the American Inno network right now. So I highly encourage you all to check them out. You can get some insight about issues that are affecting other innovation ecosystems outside of New England. Should be interesting conversations. Again, I've dropped my email in the chat box, so if anybody wants to follow up with me, you are welcome to do so. And if any of the panelists are open to it, I can also pass on questions that we didn't get to. I want to thank our sponsors again, the Grommet, the Tech Connection, and First Republic. And I want to thank our virtual host today, RuPauls Group. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.